us! Please help us!
Hold on! Come on, I've got you!
The wind came first, a low growl rolling out of the desert canyons, tugging at the shutters of Samuel's weather-beaten ranch house. He had lived through storms before, but this one carried a strange weight in its breath. When the first drops of rain smacked against the dry earth, he knew the night was about to turn mean. Samuel pulled his hat tight, slid into his worn duster, and stepped out into the dark. Lightning forked across the horizon, showing the wide sweep of his cattle pasture. The animals were restless, their bawling carried on the wind, and instinct told him he couldn't leave them to fend for themselves. He saddled his old mare Daisy, her ears twitching nervously, and urged her toward the ridge where the canyon opened wide. The rain came harder, cold needles stinging his face. Dust turned to mud beneath Daisy's hooves, and every thunderclap felt like it split the sky. Samuel leaned low in the saddle, squinting through the downpour, guiding the mare along paths he could ride blind. He muttered soft words to her, voice nearly drowned by the storm. Halfway down the canyon trail, the sound reached him, different from the wind, sharper than the cries of cattle. It was human, a scream, then another, muffled and broken, echoing off the rocks. Samuel froze, pulling Daisy to a halt. He listened hard. The cries came again, faint but desperate. Someone was out there, and they were in trouble. "Lord above," he whispered, kicking Daisy into a trot. The cries led him deeper, to a place where the canyon wall had crumbled under the rain. The landslide was fresh, boulders and mud still shifting under the weight of water rushing down. In the flicker of lightning, Samuel saw movement. Two enormous shapes were half buried in the debris, struggling weakly against the weight pinning them. Samuel slid from the saddle, boots sinking ankle-deep in the muck. He rushed forward, heart pounding. As he drew closer, the storm revealed their faces. Not men, but women. Two of them, and not ordinary women. They were giants. The first had long black hair plastered to her face, her eyes blazing even as pain twisted her features. The second, just beside her, was paler, softer, but no less striking. Both were trapped beneath the stones, their arms straining, their voices hoarse from calling out. "Help!" the softer one gasped, her voice carrying even through the roar of the storm. Samuel didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees, pushing at the rocks. The weight was staggering, but he set his jaw and worked. His hands slipped, mud caked his fingers, but he pried one boulder free, then another. The darker-haired woman gritted her teeth, using the small space he cleared to shift her body. "Push again!" Samuel shouted, though he wasn't sure they understood his English. Together with her strength and his determination, the rocks gave way. She pulled herself free with a ragged cry, then turned immediately to help her sister. Samuel joined in, sweat mixing with rain, muscles screaming as they shifted stone after stone. At last, the second woman slipped free, collapsing into the mud. Both women lay gasping, bodies trembling from exhaustion. Samuel knelt between them, breathless himself, unsure what he had just stumbled into. Their size was staggering. Each one stood taller, broader than any man he knew. Yet in their eyes he saw something vulnerable, something raw. "You're safe now," he said, though his words were nearly swallowed by thunder. The fierce one blinked at him, chest heaving. "Who are you?" Her accent was thick, but her English was clear. "Samuel," he answered quickly. "My ranch is close. You'll die out here if we don't move." The gentler one tried to rise but faltered, her legs buckling. Samuel caught her under the arm, nearly thrown off balance by her weight, but he steadied her. The other staggered to her feet, towering over him even in her weakened state, but she clutched her side as though something inside was broken. "No choice," Samuel muttered to himself. He whistled for Daisy. The mare balked at the sight of the women, but Samuel pulled her close, forcing calm into her reins. "Come on, girl. Tonight's not the night to spook." With effort that felt near impossible, Samuel helped the sisters onto Daisy's back. One slumped against the other. The mare protested, but held. Samuel grabbed the reins and led them back toward the ranch, boots slipping in the mud as lightning lit their path. By the time they reached the cabin, Samuel's muscles ached and his lungs burned. He guided Daisy under the awning, helped the women down, and half-carried them inside. The cabin was small, one room with a hearth and a single cot, but it was warm and dry. Samuel stoked the fire high, stripped the wet blankets from his bed, and wrapped them around the women. They sat huddled together, their massive frames dwarfing his furniture, shivering as the storm raged outside. Samuel worked without pause. He fetched clean water, tended to cuts and bruises, tore strips of cloth for bandages. The fiercer one watched him with sharp eyes, as though weighing his every move, while the gentler one leaned into his touch, sighing in relief as he cleaned the mud from her arms. "You'll be all right," Samuel told them, voice steady though his heart thundered. "Rest now. You're safe." The fierce one finally spoke again, her voice softer than before. "Why?" Samuel paused. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the storm." The firelight flickered, throwing shadows across their faces. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then the gentler one smiled faintly, her eyelids heavy. "Thank you," she whispered, before sleep claimed her. The other remained awake, watching Samuel as though he were both savior and stranger. Only when the fire settled into a steady glow did her shoulders ease, and her eyes too began to close. Samuel sat back, weary beyond measure, and studied them. Their height, their strength, the cut of their features, he had no doubt now. These were not ordinary women. They were Apache, and not just Apache, but women of a size and presence unlike any he had ever seen. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin, a different storm brewed in Samuel's heart. Whatever tomorrow brought, his life had just changed forever. The storm broke at dawn, leaving behind a land heavy with silence. The earth was soaked, the air sharp with the scent of wet sage and cedar. Samuel rose from the chair by the hearth, stiff from a sleepless night, and turned his eyes toward the figures still bundled in his blankets. The women slept deeply, their breathing slow, the rise and fall of their chests reminding him that they were alive. In the fire's dying glow, they seemed even larger than he remembered. Limbs sprawled across the floor, shoulders too broad for the cot, feet brushing against the walls. His cabin, built for one man's solitude, was too small for them, and he couldn't shake the thought that he was looking at some vision drawn from a myth. When the fiercer one stirred, Samuel busied himself with the kettle. The scrape of iron against the hearth was enough to rouse her fully. She blinked, dark eyes narrowing as they fixed on him. "You still here?" she said, her voice gravelly but strong. Samuel nodded, pouring hot water into a tin cup. "Where else would I be?" She pushed herself upright, wincing at the effort. Her body was bruised, her lips split, but her presence filled the cabin like a thunderhead. The second woman stirred as well, slower, more delicate in her movements. When she met Samuel's gaze, her eyes softened. "You saved us," she said simply. Samuel set the cup down before them. "It wasn't much choice. Couldn't leave you out there." The fiercer one reached for the drink, fingers dwarfing the tin, and sipped cautiously. The warmth spread color back into her face. Her sister accepted a second cup, cradling it with both hands, as though it were something precious. "What do I call you?" Samuel asked. The gentler one smiled faintly. "I am Ayana," she gestured toward her sister. "This is Nayeli." Samuel tipped his hat in greeting. "Samuel. Folks around here just call me Sam." For a time, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the drip of rain from the eaves outside. Samuel studied them discreetly, noticing the way their features mirrored each other in strength and grace. Their skin bore the sun's kiss, their hair hung thick and black, their frames immense, as if carved from the land itself. He had known Apache warriors, seen them ride the plains, but never women like these. "You live here alone," Ayana said, her English careful but clear. Samuel nodded. "Been that way near 20 years. This land, these cattle, it's all I've got." Nayeli's eyes swept the cabin, sharp and assessing. "Small," she muttered, as though the walls offended her. Samuel chuckled. Small, maybe, but it stood through storms worse than last night's. The sisters exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. Ayana's smile lingered, but Nayeli's expression hardened. "You took us in," she said suddenly. "But why?" Samuel leaned back, arms resting on his knees. "Because you were hurt. Because no one deserves to be left in the mud. That's reason enough, isn't it?" Nayeli didn't answer right away. Her gaze held his, probing, testing. Finally, she looked away, muttering under her breath, in her own tongue. Ayana touched her arm gently, silencing her. Hours passed in uneasy companionship. Samuel offered bread and dried meat from his stores, which the sisters accepted with quiet hunger. He checked their wounds again, replacing the bandages, careful not to overstep. Ayana thanked him with soft words, while Nayeli endured his touch with clenched teeth, suspicion never leaving her eyes. When the rain lightened, Samuel stepped outside to tend the cattle. The pasture was a mess, mud sucking at his boots, but the herd had weathered the storm. From the porch, the sisters watched him work, their tall forms framed by the cabin door. Their presence unsettled him, not in fear, but in the way they stirred a life he thought long gone. By afternoon, the sun broke through, and the land steamed with heat. Samuel returned to find Ayana, trying to help with the fire, her large hands awkward around his tools, while Nayeli stood guard-like near the window, her eyes on the horizon. "You think someone's comin'?" Samuel asked her. Nayeli didn't answer at first. Then she turned, her gaze heavy. "Our people will seek us. They will not find it good, seeing us here." Samuel stilled. The truth of it was plain. 2 Apache women of their stature could not simply vanish. Their tribe would come, and when they did, suspicion would follow. "You'll heal here," Samuel said quietly. "After that, we'll see." Ayana's smile trembled, caught between gratitude and fear. Nayeli only narrowed her eyes, as though she already knew the storm was far from over. That night, the cabin felt smaller than ever. Samuel gave up his cot to them, laying himself by the fire. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, he caught the sound of their voices, low and melodic in their own tongue, carrying through the dark. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the weight of them, heavy as the thunderclouds that had passed. He knew, deep in his bones, that the rescue had only been the beginning. And as the flames flickered low, Samuel found his thoughts circling back to the truth he could no longer deny. The women he had brought into his home were Apache, yes, but more than that, they were daughters of someone important, and their presence would bring consequences he could not yet measure. For the first time in years, Samuel felt both the thrill and the dread of not being alone. The third morning broke with a stillness that carried warning, the kind of silence that pressed on the skin before something heavy arrived. Samuel woke early, long before the sisters stirred, his body trained by years of ranch work to meet the day in the dark. He stepped outside, letting the cool air bite his lungs. The land looked washed clean by the storm, the sky pale and wide, but there was no peace in it. The tracks were there, fresh, clustered, circling the edge of his pasture. Hoofprints, many of them, pressed deep into the damp earth. He didn't need a second glance to know they weren't from his cattle. He turned back toward the cabin, his heart steady but heavy. The sisters were awake now. Nayeli stood tall by the window, shoulders taut, scanning the horizon as though she had felt it too. Ayana sat quietly on the cot, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes lowered. "They are coming," Nayeli said, voice flat. Samuel didn't ask how she knew. He only tightened the strap on his holster, though he had no wish to draw his gun. "Then we'll meet them." By noon, the riders appeared. A dust cloud rose on the horizon, sunlight glinting off spearheads and rifle barrels. The thunder of hooves carried across the valley until the ground itself seemed to shake. Samuel stood on the porch, hat in hand, Daisy tied nearby, his frame dwarfed by the wide sky and the line of warriors descending toward his ranch. The sisters came to stand behind him, shadows long and tall against the cabin wall. Ayana's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, steadying him, while Nayeli's presence loomed like a storm at his back. The riders slowed as they reached the fence line, forming a half-circle around the cabin. At their head sat a man who seemed carved from the desert itself. Broad-shouldered, proud, his face marked by lines of age and strength. His hair, streaked with gray, hung loose down his back, and his eyes burned sharp beneath a heavy brow. Even before he spoke, Samuel knew who he was. The chief. Tall Elk, Ayana whispered, her voice trembling. The chief's gaze swept the scene, taking in Samuel, the cabin, his daughter standing close beside him. His jaw tightened, and his hand gripped the shaft of the long spear resting across his horse's flank. "You," he said in a voice that rolled like distant thunder. "Rancher." Samuel swallowed, but he did not step back. "My name is Samuel. You took what is not yours." The chief's words were heavy, each one deliberate. His eyes cut toward Nayeli and Ayana. "My blood. My daughters." Samuel's throat worked. "I didn't take them. I found them in the canyon. The storm buried them under rock and mud. I pulled them free and brought them here. That's all." A ripple of murmurs moved through the warriors, disbelief sharp in their tones. Spears angled forward, rifles lifted slightly. Samuel kept his hands loose at his sides, his voice calm though his heart thundered. "They would have died," he said. "No man, no beast could have survived the night out there. I did what anyone should have done." "Lies." One of the braves snapped. "White man seeks to shame us, to steal our women." Samuel felt Ayana step forward before he even turned his head. Her voice rang out strong despite the fear in her chest. "No. He speaks truth. We were trapped. He saved us. Without him, the storm would have taken us." Nayeli's voice followed, sharper, burning with defiance. "He is no thief. He is no coward. His hands bled, pulling the stones from us. He gave us his fire, his food, his home." "You would call that theft?" Tall Elk's gaze lingered on them, unreadable. He dismounted slowly, his presence towering even from the ground. He walked forward, each step deliberate, until he stood face to face with Samuel. The rancher looked up into eyes as deep and dangerous as the canyon itself. "You expect me to believe you took nothing in return?" the chief asked, low and dangerous. Samuel held his ground. "I expect nothing from you. I gave what I could. That's all a man can do." For a long, tense moment, silence held. The warriors waited, ready to strike. The sisters held their breath, their bodies taut with fear and loyalty. Samuel stood with the sun burning on his back, hat still pressed to his chest, eyes steady. Tall Elk studied him, gaze searching, piercing. Then, slowly, he lowered his spear. The warriors eased, though suspicion still burned in their faces. "My daughters speak for you," the chief said. "Their voices carry weight, but trust is not given for words alone." He turned, his voice carrying to the circle of riders. "This man claims honor. Let him prove it." His eyes returned to Samuel, sharp as steel. "You will come with us. You will live among us. You will show whether your heart is as true as your tongue." Samuel's jaw tightened. He thought of his ranch, his cattle, the life he had built in solitude. But when he looked at Ayana's pleading eyes and Nayeli's fierce, proud stance beside him, the choice was already made. "I'll come," he said quietly, "if that's what it takes." Ayana's breath caught, relief softening her features. Nayeli's lips curved in the faintest ghost of a smile. Tall Elk gave a single nod. "Then we will see what kind of man you are." The warriors parted, making way. Samuel untied Daisy, leading her forward, the sisters falling in step beside him. As they crossed the fence line, leaving the safety of his ranch behind, Samuel knew he was stepping into a world that would test him more than the storm ever had. And as the sun dipped low, casting the desert in gold and blood-red light, he felt the weight of what had begun. Not a rescue, not a debt, but a reckoning that would decide the course of all their lives. The Apache camp lay hidden in a valley Samuel had never seen before, though he had lived his whole life within a day's ride of it. The journey took them across ridges where hawks wheeled, and through thickets of juniper that hid every trace of trail. The warriors moved in silence, watching him as if any wrong twitch of his hand would be his last. Samuel kept Daisy's reins steady, his boots weighted with dust, his eyes fixed forward. When the valley opened before him, the sight stole his breath. Dozens of lodges stood in a wide circle, smoke rising in thin gray lines into the blue sky. Children darted between them, their laughter sharp in the air, while women worked hides, ground maize, or tended fires. The entire camp seemed alive, each piece fitting into a rhythm Samuel could feel but not yet understand. As they entered, all eyes turned toward them. Murmurs rose. The sight of the two towering sisters returning on either side of a white rancher was enough to draw stares that pierced sharper than any blade. Some faces showed relief at seeing Nayeli and Ayana safe. Others burned with suspicion, even anger. Tall Elk rode to the center, dismounted, and raised his hand. The camp quieted at once. His voice carried easily. "My daughters have returned. This man claims he saved them from death. He will stay among us to prove his honor. Until then, he is watched." A wave of murmurs followed. Some nodded. Others spat in the dust. Samuel kept his face still, though the weight of every gaze pressed on him like the storm's wind. The sisters guided him to a small lodge near the edge of the circle. It was meant for guests, though Samuel guessed few outsiders had ever set foot in it. He ducked inside, the air thick with the scent of pine and smoke. Nayeli followed him, her towering form filling the space, arms crossed over her chest. "You must not falter," she said. "They will test you." Iana placed a hand on her sister's arm, gentling her words. "But we will help you. You are not alone." Samuel exhaled slowly. "I've lived alone a long time. Maybe it's time I wasn't." That first day, the tests began. A group of young braves led him to the corral, where horses stamped and tossed their heads. They handed him a rope and gestured toward a painted Mustang. One of the braves smirked. "Ride." Samuel knew a challenge when he saw one. He had ridden horses all his life, but never one as wild-eyed as this. Still, he swung the rope, caught the Mustang, and wrestled it close. The horse reared, nearly throwing him, but he held on, muscles straining. He swung into the saddle bareback, gripping with his knees as the Mustang bucked hard. Laughter rang out when he slipped, but Samuel gritted his teeth, clung on, and rode it until sweat slicked, both man and beast. When he slid down at last, breathless but upright, the laughter turned to murmurs of reluctant approval. The days passed in rhythm. Samuel rose with the sun, working beside the Apache. He fetched water from the river, split wood, carried burdens. His hands bled, his back ached, but he never complained. When he stumbled over their language, Ayana sat with him by the fire, guiding his tongue patiently. Her voice was soft, her laughter gentle when he mispronounced a word. In those moments, the distance between them shrank. Nayeli, by contrast, tested him constantly. She mocked his clumsy attempts at their customs, pushed him to run alongside the braves until his lungs burned, dared him to climb ridges where the wind threatened to knock him loose. Yet in her eyes there was no cruelty, only the fire of one who wished to see what he was made of. And each time he rose to meet her challenge, something unspoken flickered between them. At night, when the camp settled, Samuel lay in his lodge staring at the stars through the smoke hole above. He had never felt so far from his own world, yet never so pulled into another. The loneliness that had haunted him at his ranch seemed like a memory fading, replaced by voices, by laughter, by the sound of the sisters, low conversation in the lodge beside his. But not everyone welcomed him. Some of the younger warriors whispered, their eyes sharp with mistrust. One evening, as Samuel carried water back to the lodge, a hand shoved him hard from behind. He stumbled, spilling the pot, and turned to find 3 braves circling him. "You do not belong here," one spat. "You shame us. Walking beside our chief's daughters, Samuel straightened, heart pounding but fists steady. I didn't come here to shame anyone. I came because your chief asked it. The largest brave sneered. You will leave, or you will bleed. Before Samuel could answer, Nayeli's voice cracked through the air like a whip. Enough. She strode forward, eyes blazing, towering even over the tallest warrior. You would strike a man who saved our lives? Then you strike me first. The braves faltered, glancing at one another. Ayanna appeared at her sister's side, her voice firm but calm. The chief has spoken. Let his word be honored. The braves muttered curses and melted into the shadows, leaving Samuel standing shaken but unharmed. Nayeli looked at him, her expression fierce. You must not show fear. They respect strength. You bend, they will break you. Samuel nodded, swallowing hard. Then I'll stand. That night, Ayanna brought him herbs for his scraped hands, her touch light as she bound them. You are stronger than you know, she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world fell away, the firelight painting her features in gold, her breath warm on his skin. Samuel felt something stir in him that had long lain buried. Days stretched into weeks. Samuel grew leaner, harder, his skin darkened by the sun. He learned to ride bareback with balance, to throw a spear straight, to laugh with the children who ran circles around him. Slowly, the whispers faded, replaced by nods of acknowledgement, even respect. But the strongest bonds formed in the quiet. With Ayanna, he shared stories of his ranch, of nights alone with only cattle for company. She listened with soft eyes, her hand sometimes brushing his. With Nayeli, he shared challenges, their banter sharp, their laughter loud, each pushing the other further than they thought possible. Between the sisters, Samuel found something he had not dared hope for: companionship, belonging, even the first sparks of love. One evening, the entire camp gathered for a feast. Fires burned bright, drums echoed, voices rose in song. Samuel sat near the sisters, his heart full as children danced and elders told stories beneath the stars. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something larger than himself. Tall Elk rose, his voice carrying over the fire. This man has walked among us. He has endured our tests. He has not bent. Perhaps his heart is as true as my daughters claim. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Samuel felt eyes on him, not hostile now but curious, weighing, perhaps even welcoming. Nayeli leaned close, her smile fierce. You see, they begin to know you. Ayanna's hand brushed his, her touch tender. And so do we. Samuel sat between them, the fire warming his face, the stars endless above. The ranch he had once thought would be his tomb felt like another life. Here, with these people, with these women, he felt the stirrings of a future he had never dared to imagine. And though he knew trials still lay ahead, in that moment he allowed himself a truth that filled his chest with quiet wonder. He was no longer a man alone. The air grew heavy in the weeks that followed the feast, as though the camp itself held its breath, waiting. Samuel felt the shift in the eyes that followed him. Some were warm, softened by the memory of his struggles and small triumphs. Others remained hard, like flint that had not yet sparked. Respect had begun to take root, but doubt still lingered like a shadow. Samuel carried on with his work. He split logs until his arms ached, gathered herbs with the women, and hunted alongside the braves. He tried to let his actions speak louder than words, yet even so, he felt the weight of judgment pressing closer. One afternoon, Tall Elk called him to the center of camp. The chief stood tall, his spear grounded in the dust, his eyes as deep as the canyon walls. Around him gathered warriors and elders, their faces solemn. You have walked among us, Tall Elk said. You have worked, sweated, and bled. But one test remains. A hush fell. Samuel's stomach tightened. There is a canyon not far, the chief continued. A place of trial. At its base runs a river, swift and cold. A fallen tree spans the water. Each brave must cross it to prove his balance, his courage. If you would remain among us, you must cross as well. Samuel looked at the chief, then at the faces around him. Some gleamed with anticipation, hoping to see him fail. Others, quieter, seemed torn between fear for him and hope. Ayanna stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Father, he is not one of us. He has done enough." Nayeli's voice rang out after hers, firm and fiery. "If he takes the test, he will not falter." Samuel placed a hand on Ayanna's shoulder, steadying her. "I'll do it." The words left his mouth before doubt could take hold. The camp moved, as one, toward the canyon, a procession of judgment. Samuel walked with Daisy's reins in his hand, though he knew the horse could not help him where he was going. The sisters walked beside him, silent but watchful. When they reached the canyon, the sound of rushing water filled the air. Below, the river raged, white spray rising where it crashed against boulders. A fallen pine stretched across, stripped of bark, slick with moss. It was wide enough for a man's foot, but not much more. Samuel felt the eyes of the camp press into his back. Nayeli stood close, her voice low and fierce. "Plant your steps. Do not look down." Ayanna's hand brushed his arm, trembling with unspoken fear. "Be careful." Samuel nodded, his chest tight. Then he stepped onto the log. The roar of the river filled his ears. Each step felt heavier than the last. The log shifted faintly beneath him, slick beneath his boots. He forced his gaze forward, remembering Nayeli's words. Halfway across, a shout rang out behind him. "Fall, white man! The river will take you!" Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Samuel clenched his jaw, steadying himself. His boots slipped, and for one heartbeat he saw only the white froth below, felt the pull of the water calling him down. Gasps rose from the crowd. Then he caught himself, arms wide, breath ragged. He forced another step, then another, his muscles shaking, his heart thundering louder than the river. At last his boots touched solid earth on the far side. For a moment he stood still, disbelieving. Then cheers broke out, children first, then women, even some of the braves. Tall Elk's voice cut through it all. "He is crossed." Samuel turned, sweat running down his face, and met the eyes of the chief. For the first time, he thought he saw respect. Not reluctant, not forced, but real. That night, the camp celebrated. Fires burned bright, drums thundered, and voices lifted in song. Samuel sat among them, his body weary but his spirit alive. Nayeli clapped him hard on the back, laughing with pride. Ayanna leaned close, her voice soft in his ear. "You did it. You belong." The words filled him with a warmth deeper than the fire. As the night wore on, Samuel found himself walking with the sisters beyond the circle of firelight, into the quiet of the desert night. The stars burned clear above, endless and bright. Nayeli stopped first, turning to him, her dark eyes shining. "You are strong, Samuel, not just in body, but in heart. Few men would have stood as you have. I did not trust you. Now I do." Her hand brushed his arm, rough and steady, and for a moment Samuel felt the weight of her loyalty, fierce, unyielding like the land itself. Ayanna stepped close, her eyes softer, glistening with something unspoken. "I feared for you, more than I thought I would. You are no longer just the man who saved us. You are part of us." Her fingers intertwined with his, gentle and warm. Samuel's breath caught between the fire in Nayeli's gaze and the tenderness in Ayanna's. "I don't know what I deserve," he said, voice low, "but I know I don't want to go back to the life I had before." Nayeli smiled, fierce and proud. "Then don't." Ayanna's smile trembled, full of hope. "Stay." The moment stretched, stars wheeling silently overhead. Samuel felt it then, a truth that settled deep into his chest. He loved them, not one over the other, not divided but together. Two halves of something whole, something greater than any life he had known. When they returned to camp, Tall Elk awaited them. He studied Samuel long, then looked to his daughters. Their faces told him everything. The chief nodded slowly, as though a burden had lifted from his shoulders. "This man," he said to the camp, his voice ringing clear, "is no longer a stranger. He is one of us. He saved my daughters. He has proven his courage. He has earned his place." The camp erupted in cries of approval. The few who still doubted were drowned out by the voices of the many. Samuel felt his chest swell, his throat tighten. For the first time in his life, he was not an outsider. He was not alone. The days that followed were filled with change. Samuel moved easily through the camp now, greeted with nods and smiles. Children ran to him, tugging his hands, begging for rides on Daisy. Women offered him food, laughter in their voices. Even the braves, once cold, sparred with him in practice, their eyes glinting with respect. But it was with Nayeli and Ayanna that his heart found its true home. Nayeli rode with him across the ridges, her laughter sharp as the wind, her presence a constant challenge that lifted him higher. Ayanna sat with him by the river, teaching him songs in her tongue, her voice weaving around his like the water itself. Together they filled the silence that had haunted him for years. One evening, Samuel returned with them to his ranch. The cabin stood where he had left it, weathered and small against the wide land. Once, it had been a tomb of loneliness. Now, with their laughter spilling through its door, with their voices filling its walls, it became something new. A home. As the sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in fire, Samuel stood on the porch, his arms around the sisters, and let the truth settle in him. He was no longer the lonely rancher he had been. He was Samuel, the man who had found love, family, and belonging where he had least expected it. And in the warmth of that moment, with the desert wind carrying the promise of tomorrow, he knew the life ahead would be richer than anything he had ever dared to dream. From the fury of a storm to the silence of the canyon, from suspicion to trust, Samuel's journey with Nayeli and Ayanna proved that even the loneliest heart can find a place to belong. In the warmth of love and the strength of family, a ranch once haunted by solitude became a home filled with laughter, courage, and hope. If you enjoyed this tale of heart, honor, and unexpected romance, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Chronicles. Join us for more stories where the untamed frontier meets timeless love. You won't want to miss what comes next.